What is theory of mind? Have you ever heard the statement, don't judge another person until you've walked a mile in their shoes? That gets at theory of mind. Do you understand what your perspective on the world is? And do you understand that other people have a perspective of the world that differs from yours? That's theory of mind. So you have to realize some people don't feel the same thing that you feel at any point in time. So I have two examples here. On the left is a woman who clearly does not want to be hugged by this guy, and he doesn't quite understand it, right? She's experiencing this hug very differently from he is. So he's showing a failure of theory of mind. On the right is a older sister who's very excited about having a driver's license, and in the back seat is her much younger brother who is terrified because now the sister is driving and it just scares him completely. So she doesn't understand, the sister doesn't understand, apparently, that even though she's excited about driving, her brother is not excited about being in the car with her. There are a number of different tests of theory of mind. Here is one. You look at pictures of a little boy fishing. And with these pictures, we can see what the little boy has caught on his fishing hook, on his fishing line, but the little boy can't see what's on the fishing line. So, for example, in the bottom picture, we know that the little boy has caught a fish, but the question is, what does the little boy think he's caught? And in this case, the right answer would be fish. But the key situation is the one up top. The little boy has caught a shoe. Okay. The question is, what does the little boy think he's caught? Not what do you think, but what does the little boy think he's caught? Well, the little boy would think he's caught a fish, but we know he's caught a shoe. So the question is, can someone participating in this task say shoe instead of fish? Another measure is something called the Sally Ann task, and instead of going through it here, what I'm going to do is show you a super video on theory of mind with children in which a box of crayons doesn't contain crayons, it contains candles. And would somebody who didn't know the box contained candles guess what was in the box? Enjoy this.
We're gonna have a tea party with Play-Doh. I'm gonna serve myself. Here, Sarah. No!
Well, you've probably discovered that however smart your 3-year-old is, she doesn't seem able to put herself in someone else's mental shoes, to imagine how they think and what they believe. Perhaps you thought your parenting skills were to blame, but scientists suggest that understanding other minds is a skill that may not be fully developed until a child is about 4. To learn how children's social skills evolve between about 3 and 4, researchers use something called a false belief test. What do you think's in this box? Looks fairly obvious, doesn't it? Crayons. But let me show you. I filled it full of candles. All right, now I close it up again. While you and I have been having this conversation, Snoopy has been down here, asleep. Doesn't know what we've talked about. But let's bring him into the conversation. Now I have another question for you. What do you think Snoopy will say if I ask him what's in this box? Crayons, obviously. What else could anybody possibly say? Well, watch this 3-year-old.
What do you think is inside this box? Let's open it up and see.
Candles.
Now, you can ask the child what appears to be a very simple question about that. What did you think was inside the box when you first saw it? They say, oh, I always thought that there were candles in this box. Then you can ask them about someone else. So you can ask them about Snoopy. Snoopy's been sitting here. He hasn't seen this box. He's never seen us open it up. What does Snoopy think is inside this box?
Candles.
Children say the same thing. Snoopy will think there are candles inside this box. And what that indicates is that the children's view of how minds work is very, very different from the view that you and I would have. Did you see it?
In the mind of the 3-year-old, everyone sees the world much the same way. there's no difference between what I think and believe and what everyone else, including Snoopy, thinks and believes. It is, in a sense, a naive and innocent view of the world, a kind of mental Eden. And then, about 4, comes the fall from grace.
Now, if you take a 4-year-old, quite typically the 4-year-old will tell you that, as a matter of fact, he thought there were crayons in the box, and then he found out that there were candles in the box. You can ask him about Snoopy, and he'll say, oh no, Snoopy will think that there are crayons in this box. Great, why will he think that?
Because it's a crayon box.
That's right, and that's going to make him think they're crayons. What's really in the box?
Candles.
Right. And then you get the 5-year-olds who are just utterly blasé and think that this is such an obvious thing, it's silly even to ask the question. What that shows is that by the time children are 4 and 5, they have a view of the mind that looks much more like our view of the mind. They understand that things can be tricky and deceptive, that you can change your mind, that things aren't always the way that they seem. And that gives them a very different vision of how the mind works and how people work.
Okay, that's theory of mind. Neurophysiologists have proposed that cells with a certain kind of property called mirroring or mirror neurons may be responsible for theory of mind. Now, mirror neurons were identified first by neurophysiologists in Italy who were studying the reaching behavior in monkeys. And what they found, quite accidentally, is that some cells in the motor system would fire when, say, a monkey was doing a particular thing like reaching out and grabbing a raisin. But the same cell would fire when the monkey was perfectly still, but it watched another monkey or human perform that same action. In other words, you've got cells in the motor system that are responding not to the movement of the observer, but to the sight of someone else moving in that same way. So if you've got cells that respond both when you do something and when you see another person do that same thing, maybe those cells are what allow us to have empathy, to connect with other people. And a really great example of that is yawning. If you've ever been with a group of people and one person yawned, it's really hard not to yawn too. And that mimicry of other people's actions is thought to be an illustration of mirror neurons at work. Okay, really briefly, I'm going to tell you about a theory of psychosocial development that was proposed by this fellow, Erik Erikson. And Erik Erikson believed that your personality was not genetically determined, it was determined by the experiences that you had early in life and then at later stages of life. In fact, he developed an 8-stage model of psychosocial development. In each of these stages, it's proposed that you're trying to work out how the world works and what your place is in it. You may have heard the phrase identity crisis. That comes from Erik Erikson, and it's a term that he used to describe a struggle that people have in their teenage years when they're trying to figure out who they are. So maybe a high school student who one day is acting goth and the next day is acting like a surfer dude. Identity crisis, trying to figure out what is my identity. But I want to tell you about the first 2 stages of Erik Erikson's model. The first one is trust versus trust. The idea here is that as a baby, you're trying to figure out, do I trust the world to meet my needs, or can I not trust the world or other people to meet my needs? In other words, as a baby, does a baby feel hopeful, or does the baby feel like the world is cruel and unloving, unfriendly? After that stage, usually about the time when children start to potty train, according to Erik Erikson, the question that they're trying to develop is a sense of autonomy. Can I function well in this world? Or a sense of feeling shame, doubt about whether they can function in the world. And you could see how that would fit with potty training, right? If a parent shames the child about their struggles in learning how to use a toilet, that could lead to a child who feels shame their whole life, according to Erik Erikson. Again, there's 8 stages, but I'm just going to tell you about those 2. That's it on my lecture in development. Students, back to campus. Everybody else, thank you.